Good morning, and welcome to the Backlog Files. I am Adam. We're trying something new today, so if you've been following what we do here, you know that the Backlog Files was originally a podcast as part of a combination of 30-minute reviews and Beware of Spoilers, with the older releases coming from 30-minute reviews and new release episodes coming from Beware of Spoilers. We used to be hosted on Spreaker. We recently, within the last year, migrated over to Spotify, and we've used Spotify to kind of keep track of our show. The issue is Spotify's build an episode tool is being modified, so we're using Riverside now, which we're going to find out how good Riverside is, which is kind of fun. So maybe you hear this, maybe you don't. Who knows? We'll find out. We will say, what's it called? We're here to talk about Dune, because it's Dune week. So this episode's going up Friday. Tomorrow on Beware of Spoilers, Peter and I will be getting together to talk about the cool new stuff coming from, from Dune Part 2. But today we're going to look at video games of Dune, which sounds like a Dune book, because all the books are like Blank of Dune, Jessica of Dune, Paul of Dune, Princesses of Dune, Heretics of Dune, which is an actual book, not one of the weird, spin-offs by his son. Regardless, we're going to talk about, the video game history of Dune. And Dune, in a weird way, has a robust history within the video game industry. It's not about them. It's in a weird spot, because Dune, the book came out in 1965, and has kind of existed along since then through this series, and then it was continued after Frank Herbert died, his son Brian Herbert continued. In 1984, we got the movie that David Lynch directed that starred what's his name? That starred Kyle MacLachlan and Sting. And then Dune kind of fell away for a while. And there was still the persistent books that would come along. There were tons of books set before and after and during the saga as was established by Frank Herbert. 2 sequels that kind of rounded out the story based on the outlines that Frank Herbert wrote. And the question became, where are we? What else was going on there? And the answer is, it had a pretty important spot for video games. Dune 2 was a video game that came out for the Sega Genesis, and this is kind of the game that we get the modern 4X grand strategy from. A lot of the tropes that come from, that were established here went on to be used in, Civilization, Age of Empires, Age of Empires. All these games that came after were all heavily influenced by this game. It introduced the fog of war. It introduced the ideas of, controlling cities and controlling output and all of that. And the general concept for all of these games is basically the same. You are on Arrakis, and you have to control the spice production, because he who controls the spice controls the universe. And your goal is to take control of the universe by controlling Arrakis. And each game has kind of incrementally played on that a little bit, because it's the first one is very basic, then you get to Dune 2000, which came out for the PlayStation 1, which I recently found at a retro game store. Shout out to Game On over in Miller Place, which expanded and added some new, some new houses. This is where we get House Orthos. It's things like that, where it's okay, so this existed in a niche. It existed in this weird intersection of, people who liked playing these games and also liked playing science fiction. It kind of did a great job of existing in both spots, and it really did build a lot of what happened after. And most recently, we've had Dune take another form. Now, there is that MMO coming. We're not going to talk about that, because I haven't looked enough into that. But I did play a few rounds of Dune Spice Wars, which launched in early access last year. And it feels like we're taking Dune, which has this robust history in the 4X grand strategy tradition. And then we're going to take it and we're going to expand it and we're going to modernize it. We're going to bring it to what we expect now from a game like Civilization 5, Civilization 6, which I don't know about anyone else out there, but I play a ton of. It's a guilty pleasure game of mine, the same as like, Pokemon Legends Arceus is a game that I'll jump back into and just play for a bit, or any number of Pokemon games, or Stardew Valley. But Civilization's also in that conversation where it's like I will throw it on and play around a Civilization if I have a few hours to kill, and I'm just like, let me just, do this for a little bit. To that end, I was very interested in this game and the visual aesthetic of the game. I love the way it looks, and it's the kind of thing where it's like I sat down and I'm like, I've played Civilization. I'm good at Civilization when playing against a computer, not other real people. I will play this no problem. And then I start playing, I'm like, oh, this is very different from Civilization. Let me figure out the rules by playing through the tutorials. So I played through the tutorials, I played a few rounds. And again, I do like that they, like, my issue with it is, and it's part of the issues with, like, Dune the books, too, which we'll probably talk about again tomorrow, and I know Peter has the same issue. Like, they keep talking about all these houses, but all we ever hear about is House Atreides, House Carino, and House Harkonnen. We don't hear about the other houses. Like, House Isaz, or however you pronounce it, which is in this, in Spice Wars, you do get this kind of sense that it is a, like, what's what I'm looking for here? It's a, it is one of the other houses, and it's another major house on the level, and it does make its debut in Paul of Dune, which is a book that came out a few years ago, but it's kind of in the same weird place as House Orthos, which only existed in an encyclopedia prior to its existence. We don't really hear about the other houses, and for those who will be seeing, Dune this weekend, Dune Part 2 this weekend, this idea of these other houses, they come into play in a big way in this book, in this movie, but not by name, and you'll see what I'm talking about when you see this movie. Like, it's cool that we have these other houses that are so major around the same level, but we don't really know anything about them. Or care to know anything about them, because it's fundamentally the story of the Atreides, family. And again, we'll talk about this more tomorrow over on Beware of Spoilers, because I don't want to spoil Dune Part 2 for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, because this is going up on the day Dune Part 2 comes out. But this is a very interesting kind of way to go about, existing as a franchise, or as a series, outside of the media you were born in. I don't like calling Dune really a franchise, even though it probably is, at this point, one of the most lucrative franchises at Warner Brothers, considering that the movie is projected to do, like, $1.7 million. $170 million over the opening weekend. I saw it in a packed IMAX theater on Sunday night. Last week, I saw it during the fan early screening, and man, that was a packed theater. I think the game plays very well, though, and look, I love the idea of the Landstrad being a mechanic, in the same way that, like, the United Nations is a mechanic of late game Civilization 5 and Civilization 6. Like, as you get through and you establish the United Nations, all the countries get together and vote, and there's impact on that. I wish that there was a way to, in this, to have more of the houses in play. Maybe they could do that in further, in further updates, because I know they just added this most recent house recently, so, I think they added it right at the 1.0 formal launch, because it was in early access for the longest time. I would be interested to see how that could play out if they added more, because, like, that's one of the cool things. Like, if you play Civilization on, like, a 12 or a 16 thing, and then you also have all of the, all of the city-states, that's kind of cool. I do appreciate that they don't treat the Fremen in this game as barbarian class, which is something that was, a concern of mine going into it. This idea that, like, they would, reduce them to that. But to have them as a playable faction on the same level as the Atreides, as the Harkonnen, as the Carino, as the Smugglers even, like, it's an interesting way to go about it. And there are other ways to and that's the interesting thing about this. There's multiple ways to win. It feels very much like Civilization, but Dune, and it's very fun in that regard. I would recommend it. I would very much recommend that you go and check out what's it called? You go and check out what's this called? Dune Spice Wars, which is available on Xbox or PC Game Pass. I bought it on Steam. Because I like to, buy what I support. And I would very much recommend playing it. Because it is, if you like grand strategy, it is a good grand strategy game. But we will wrap up there for today. Next week we have Pokemon Crystal, and the week after that we have, what the fuck was the next one? Hang on, I don't remember. Didn't I put it on the list somewhere, or something like that? Backlog files launch. Pokemon Stadium 2. And then we get to, Pokemon Crystal, then Pokemon Stadium 2, then Ruby and Sapphire. We're getting into the fun times now of the Pokemon ranking. But we'll wrap up there for today. So until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.